Jake's heart raced as his small spaceship touched down on the surface of planet X-52. He had been traveling through space for months, looking for new worlds to explore. Now he was finally here, ready to step onto a planet no human had ever visited before. As the ship's door opened with a soft hiss, Jake took his first breath of alien air. It smelled sweet, like a mix of flowers and fruit. He smiled, thinking it was a good start to his adventure. Stepping out of his ship, Jake looked around. The sky was a light purple color, with two small moons peeking through the clouds. The ground under his feet felt soft and spongy, covered in a carpet of tiny, star-shaped plants. But what really caught Jake's eye was the forest in front of him. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. The trees were tall and skinny, with smooth bark that shimmered like metal. Instead of green leaves, they had blue ones that looked like tiny hearts. These blue leaves seemed to dance in the air, even though there was no wind. Jake walked closer to the forest, his eyes wide with wonder. As he got nearer, he noticed something even stranger. The trees were making noises. At first, Jake thought it was just the sound of leaves rustling, but as he listened more closely, he realized it sounded like words, not clear words, but soft whispers that almost made sense. "Hello," Jake called out, feeling a bit silly for talking to trees. But to his surprise, the whispers got louder. Jake's mind raced. Were the trees actually talking, or was his brain playing tricks on him after his long journey through space? He decided to test it out. Jake walked up to the nearest tree and put his hand on its trunk. The metal-like bark felt warm under his touch, almost like it had a heartbeat. "Can you understand me?" Jake asked the tree. The whispers stopped for a moment. Then, very softly, Jake heard something that sounded like yeses. Jake jumped back, his eyes wide with shock. The trees could talk. This was the biggest discovery of his life. Excited, Jake ran from tree to tree, touching each one and listening to their whispers. Some sounded happy, others confused. A few even seemed to be laughing at Jake's excitement. As the day went on, Jake started to understand the tree talk better. He learned that the forest was very old, older than any forest on Earth. The trees had been on this planet for millions of years, watching the stars and dreaming of visitors from other worlds. Jake told the trees about Earth and his journey through space. The forest listened with interest, their blue leaves twinkling like stars as they whispered to each other. As the purple sky turned dark, Jake realized he had spent the whole day talking to the trees. He hadn't even set up his camp or unpacked his gear. But he didn't care. This was the most amazing day of his life. Jake walked back to his ship, his head full of new ideas and questions. He couldn't wait to learn more about this strange, whispering forest. As he climbed into his ship for the night, Jake heard a soft chorus of whispers from the forest. It sounded like they were saying, "Good night, Jake. See you tomorrow." Jake smiled and waved at the trees. "Good night, my new friends," he said. "We have so much more to talk about." As he drifted off to sleep that night, Jake dreamed of blue leaves and whispered words. He knew that his adventure on this planet was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see what other secrets the strange forest held. Little did Jake know, the talking trees were just the start of the amazing things he would discover on planet X-52. But that was a story for another day. For now, Jake slept peacefully, surrounded by the gentle whispers of his new tree friends. The next morning, Jake woke up early. He was excited to talk more with the strange whispering trees he had found yesterday. He quickly ate his breakfast and stepped out of his spaceship. The purple sky of planet X-52 was bright with sunlight. Jake walked towards the forest, his heart beating fast. He couldn't wait to learn more about these amazing talking trees. As Jake got closer to the forest, he heard the soft whispers again. It sounded like the trees were talking to each other. Jake smiled and called out, "Good morning, tree friends." The whispers stopped for a moment. Then Jake heard a clear voice say, "Good morning, Jake." It came from a tall tree with extra shiny bark. Jake's eyes went wide. "You can speak clearly now?" he asked, surprised. The shiny tree's leaves rustled. "Yes," it said. "We learned more of your language while you slept. We are quick learners." Jake laughed with joy. That's amazing, he said. What should I call you? The tree was quiet for a moment. Then it said, You may call me Elder. I am the oldest tree in this forest. Jake nodded. Nice to meet you, Elder, he said. Can you tell me more about your people? How long have you been here? Elder's leaves shimmered. We have been here for millions of your Earth years, it said. We have watched the stars and dreamed of meeting others like you. Jake sat down on a soft patch of ground. That's a long time, he said. How do you talk? And how can you learn so fast? Elder's branches swayed gently. We speak through vibrations in our roots and leaves, it explained, and we share knowledge through the network of roots under the ground. When one of us learns something, we all learn it. Jake nodded, amazed. That's incredible, he said. What else can you do? For the next few hours, Jake talked with Elder and the other trees. He learned that they could sense changes in the weather, feel the planet's movements, and even see faraway stars clearly. The trees asked Jake many questions too. They wanted to know about Earth, about humans, and about the other planets Jake had visited. Jake told them stories of oceans, mountains, and cities. The trees listened with great interest, their leaves twinkling with excitement. As the day went on, Jake realized something important. These trees weren't just plants that could talk. They were smart, kind, and curious. They were people, just like humans, but in a different form. Elder, Jake said, I'm so happy I found you. This is the most amazing thing I've ever seen in all my space travels. Elder's leaves rustled happily. We are glad too, Jake, it said. For so long we dreamed of this day, the day we would make first contact with beings from another world. Suddenly, Jake had an idea. Elder, he said, would you like to see inside my spaceship? I could show you pictures of Earth and other planets I've visited. The whole forest seemed to buzz with excitement. Yes, many tree voices said at once. Jake grinned. Okay, he said, but I can only take one of you. Who wants to come? Elder's branches swayed. I will go, it said. I will share what I see with the others. Jake nodded. Great, but how will you come? Can you move? Elder was quiet for a moment. Then it said, We have a way, but it might surprise you. Are you ready, Jake? Jake stood up, feeling both excited and a little nervous. I'm ready, he said. What happened next was something Jake would never forget. It was the start of an even bigger adventure, one that would change his life, and the lives of the tree people forever. Jake watched in amazement as Elder, the oldest tree in the forest, did something incredible. The tree's roots slowly came out of the ground, forming what looked like legs. Then, its branches twisted and bent, creating arms and a body. In just a few minutes, Elder had turned into a tree person, standing tall and proud. Jake's mouth fell open in surprise. This is how we move, Elder said, its voice now coming from a face-like part in its trunk. We don't do it often, but we can when we need to. Jake laughed with joy. That's amazing, he said. Let's go to my ship. I have so much to show you. As they walked to the ship, Jake noticed something strange. Some of the trees at the edge of the forest looked sick. Their blue leaves were turning brown, and their trunks seemed thinner. Elder, Jake asked, pointing at the sick trees, what's wrong with them? Elder's branches drooped sadly. That is the big problem we face, Jake, it said, and that is why we are glad you are here. We need your help. Jake frowned, worried. What's happening? Tell me everything. Elder sighed, a sound like wind through leaves. A few moon cycles ago, strange creatures came to our planet. They brought big machines that cut down trees. Many of our people were lost. Jake gasped. That's terrible. Why are they cutting down the trees? We don't know, Elder said, but their machines hurt the ground and poison the air. It makes us sick, even those they don't cut down. Jake felt angry. How could anyone hurt these kind, amazing tree people? Where are these creatures now? He asked. Elder pointed with a branch arm. They left when the weather turned cold, but they will come back when it's warm again, and that time is coming soon. Jake nodded, his mind racing with ideas. How can I help? He asked. We hoped you might have weapons or technology to stop them, Elder said. "We cannot fight. We can only watch as they destroy our home." Jake thought hard. He didn't have weapons, and he was just one person against who knows how many tree cutters. But he had to do something. "I have an idea," Jake said. "But first, let's go to my ship. I'll show you some things that might help us make a plan." In the ship, Jake showed Elder pictures and videos of Earth. Elder was amazed by the tall buildings, fast cars, and big oceans, but it was most interested in the forests. "Your trees don't move or talk?" Elder asked, surprised. Jake shook his head. "No, Earth trees are different, but they're still very important. Many humans work hard to protect forests, just like I want to protect yours." As they talked, Jake's plan started to take shape. He couldn't fight the tree cutters with weapons, but maybe he could scare them away. He just needed to make them think something on this planet was dangerous. "Elder," Jake said excitedly, "I have a plan, but I'll need help from all the trees. Can you teach them to do new things with their branches and roots?" Elder's leaves rustled with interest. "Of course," it said. "What do you have in mind?" Jake grinned. "We're going to turn your forest into the scariest place those tree cutters have ever seen. They'll think the planet is fighting back." Elder's trunk creaked in what sounded like a laugh. "That sounds like a good plan, Jake. Tell me more." As Jake explained his idea, Elder listened carefully. The tree person's leaves shimmered with hope. For the first time since the tree cutters came, the forest had a chance to survive. Jake knew his plan was risky. It might not work, and the tree cutters might still come back with more machines. But he had to try. These talking trees were his friends now, and he would do anything to help them. As the purple sky of Planet X-52 turned dark, Jake and Elder walked back to the forest. They had a lot of work to do to get ready. The fate of the entire forest now rested on Jake's wild plan. The next morning, Jake woke up early. He was excited to start working on his plan to save the forest. He quickly ate his breakfast and ran out to meet Elder. Elder was waiting for Jake at the edge of the forest. The tree person's leaves rustled in greeting. "Good morning, Jake," Elder said. "Are you ready to share your plan with everyone?" Jake nodded. "Yes, let's gather all the trees," he said. Elder made a low humming sound. Soon, all the trees in the forest were whispering excitedly. They were ready to hear Jake's plan. "Okay, everyone," Jake said loudly. "The tree cutters think this is just a normal forest, but we're going to show them it's not. We're going to make them think this planet is alive and angry." The trees whispered among themselves, confused but interested. Jake smiled and explained, "First, we need to make scary noises. Can you all rub your branches together to make a loud creaking sound?" The trees tried it. At first, it sounded like a gentle breeze, but as they practiced, it grew louder and scarier. "Great," Jake said. "Now, let's work on moving. Elder showed me how you can pull your roots up. Can you all practice that?" For the next few hours, Jake taught the trees how to make different scary sounds and movements. They learned to wave their branches like arms, to pull up their roots and take small steps, and to make their leaves rustle in patterns that sounded like words. As the trees practiced, Jake went back to his ship. He had another important part of his plan to work on. Inside the ship, Jake started working on his computer. He was creating a big, scary hologram. It would look like a huge, angry face in the sky. "This will be the final touch," Jake said to himself as he worked. "When the tree cutters see a giant face in the sky and hear the forest coming alive, they'll run away for sure." By the time the planet's 2 suns were high in the purple sky, Jake was ready to test his plan. He went back to the forest and called for Elder. "Are the trees ready?" Jake asked. Elder's leaves shimmered. "Yes, they have been practicing all morning. They are excited to try the plan." Jake grinned. "Great, let's do a test run." Jake stood at the edge of the forest. He pressed a button on a small remote control he had made. Suddenly, a giant, scary face appeared in the sky. It had glowing eyes and a mouth that seemed to move. At the same time, the trees began to move. They pulled up their roots and took slow, creaky steps. Their branches waved in the air like arms. the whole forest filled with scary creaking and rustling sounds. Jake watched in amazement. The friendly, whisper-quiet forest had turned into a terrifying, moving creature. It was even scarier than he had imagined. "This is perfect," Jake shouted over the noise. "The tree cutters will never expect this." Elder moved next to Jake, its leaves twinkling with excitement. "It is impressive, Jake," the tree person said. "But will it be enough to scare away the tree cutters?" Jake nodded confidently. "I think so, but just in case, I have one more idea." He pointed to his spaceship. "We can use my ship too. I'll paint it to look like a big monster. When the tree cutters come, I'll fly it over them, making scary noises. Between the moving forest, the face in the sky, and a flying monster, they'll think the whole planet is attacking them." Elder's trunk creaked in what sounded like a laugh. "You are very clever, Jake. I think this plan might work." Jake smiled, but then he became serious. "I hope so, Elder, but we need to be prepared. The tree cutters might come any day now. We should practice every day until they arrive." Elder nodded its branchy head. "We will, Jake, and whatever happens, we are grateful for your help." As Jake looked out at the forest, now quiet again, he felt hopeful. His plan was risky, but it was the best chance to save his tree friends. All they could do now was practice and wait for the tree cutters to return. The suns of Planet X-52 peeked over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Jake woke up early, excited to start another day of teaching the trees. "Rise and shine, forest friends," Jake called out. The trees rustled their leaves in response, some eagerly, others sleepily. Jake started with a group of 5 young trees. He had given them names to make teaching easier. There was Twiggy, the smallest but quickest learner; Leafy, who had the brightest blue leaves; Branchy, with arms that seemed to go everywhere; Rudy, who was always a bit slow to pull up his roots; and Noddy, who had a funny knot in her trunk that looked like a face. "Okay, gang," Jake said, clapping his hands. "Let's practice our scary faces." Twiggy was the first to try, twisting his branches into a fierce frown. Leafy made her leaves turn dark and spiky. Branchy waved his arms wildly, looking more funny than scary. "Good tries," Jake encouraged. "Rudy, Noddy, your turn." Rudy struggled, his branches getting tangled. Noddy, however, surprised everyone. She turned her knot face into a terrifying grimace that made Jake jump. "Wow, Noddy," Jake exclaimed. "That's perfect." Next, Jake moved on to teaching them scary sounds. He demonstrated by rubbing his hands together and making a spooky whool sound. Twiggy picked it up quickly, his thin branches creating a high-pitched whistle. Leafy's leaves rustled like whispers in the wind. Branchy's many limbs made a chorus of creaks and groans. Rudy tried his best but kept getting his roots tangled, making more of a thump than a creak. Noddy, once again, amazed everyone. She made her knot face talk, producing a deep, booming voice that echoed through the forest. "Fantastic job, everyone," Jake cheered. "You're all finding your own special scary skills." In the afternoon, Jake worked with the older, larger trees. He had named them too. There was Tall Tom, the highest tree in the forest; Wide Wanda, with branches that spread far and wide; Old Oaky, who had been around longer than anyone could remember; Bendy Burt, who could twist his trunk in amazing ways; and Sturdy Stella, who stood strong against any wind. "All right, big trees," Jake said, looking up at them. "Today we're learning to walk." Tall Tom was nervous about moving his great height. Wide Wanda worried her big branches would get in the way. Old Oaky grumbled that walking was for young saplings. Bendy Burt was excited to try, while Sturdy Stella stood firm, unsure about uprooting herself. "Don't worry," Jake reassured them. "We'll take it slow. Remember, this is to protect your home." Slowly, carefully, the big trees began to pull up their roots. The ground shook as Tall Tom took his first wobbly step. Wide Wanda swayed dangerously, her branches swinging. Old Oaky surprised everyone by smoothly gliding along, using his roots like legs. Bendy Burt twisted and turned, dancing more than walking. Sturdy Stella moved slowly but steadily, each step firm and sure. "That's it," Jake encouraged. "You're doing great." As the day went on, Jake combined all the lessons. The young trees practiced making scary faces while the big trees walked. They all worked on their spooky sounds, filling the air with a symphony of creaks, whistles, and booms. Elder, the wisest tree, watched it all with amazement. "Jake," Elder said, "you have brought out talents in us we never knew we had. But will it be enough to save our forest?" Jake looked at all the trees, from tiny Twiggy to towering tall Tom. He saw how far they had come, how much they had learned. "I believe it will, Elder," Jake said confidently. "These tree cutters won't know what hit them." As the sun set, painting the sky in deep purples, Jake gathered all the trees for one final practice. "Okay, everyone," he called out. "Let's put it all together. Show me your scariest forest." On Jake's signal, the forest came alive. Trees walked and danced, their branches waving wildly. Faces appeared in knots and trunks, grimacing and frowning. The air filled with creaks, whistles, booms, and rustles, creating a terrifying cacophony. Jake watched in awe. The once peaceful forest had transformed into something magical and fierce. These weren't just trees anymore. They were protectors, guardians of their world. As the trees settled back down, Jake felt a surge of pride and hope. "Well done, everyone," he said. "You're all amazing. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The forest rustled in agreement, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. As Jake walked back to his ship for the night, he knew that tomorrow would bring new adventures. But for now, he was content, knowing he had helped his friends discover their own strength and courage. The day Jake and the trees had been waiting for finally arrived. Early one morning, Elder's leaves started shaking with worry. "Jake, wake up," Elder called. "The tree cutters are coming back. We can feel their machines through our roots." Jake jumped out of his spaceship, fully alert. "Okay, everyone," he shouted to the forest. "This is it. Remember your training." In the distance, Jake could hear the loud rumble of the tree cutters' machines. They were getting closer. Jake's heart was beating fast, but he tried to stay calm. "Elder, get everyone ready," Jake said. "I'll prepare the sky face and my ship." As Jake worked quickly to set everything up, the trees began to move into position. The younger trees hid behind the older ones, ready to make scary noises. The big trees stood at the front, prepared to show their scariest faces. Soon, the tree cutters came into view. There were 5 big machines, each driven by a creature that looked like a mix between a human and a lizard. Jake was surprised to see them, but he didn't have time to think about it. "Now," Jake yelled. Suddenly, the giant scary face appeared in the sky. It roared loudly, making the tree cutters stop their machines in shock. At the same time, Jake's spaceship rose into the air. With its monster paint job and scary sounds blasting from the speakers, it looked like a terrifying space creature attacking. The trees sprang into action too. They pulled up their roots and started walking towards the tree cutters. Their branches waved like angry arms, and their leaves flashed bright colors. The air filled with creaking and groaning sounds. The tree cutters were frozen in fear. They had never seen anything like this before. One of them screamed and jumped out of their machine, running away as fast as they could. Seeing this, Jake decided to push their advantage. He flew his monster ship closer to the tree cutters, making it roar even louder. This was too much for the tree cutters. In a panic, they all abandoned their machines and ran away, disappearing into the distance. Jake landed his ship and turned off the sky face. The forest gradually became quiet again. For a moment, everyone was still, hardly believing what had just happened. Then, a cheer went up from the trees. Their leaves rustled with joy, and even the ground seemed to shake with their happiness. "We did it," Jake shouted, jumping up and down. "We scared them away." Elder moved closer to Jake, its leaves shimmering with gratitude. "Thank you, Jake, the old tree said. You have saved our forest." Jake smiled, feeling proud and relieved. "We all did it together," he said. "But will they stay away? What if they come back with more machines?" Elder's branches swayed thoughtfully. "I don't think they will," it said. They believe our planet is alive and angry. They will tell others, and no one will want to come here to cut trees." Jake nodded, realizing Elder was right. Their plan hadn't just worked, it had worked better than they had hoped. Over the next few days, Jake helped the trees clean up the machines left behind by the tree cutters. They buried them deep in the ground, using them to feed the soil. As Jake prepared to leave the planet, he felt sad. He had grown to love this strange, wonderful forest. "Do you really have to go?" Elder asked, its leaves drooping a little. Jake nodded. "Yes, I need to explore other worlds, but I promise I'll come back to visit." Elder brightened at this. "We will be waiting, Jake, and we will practice our scary faces for when you return." Jake laughed. "I can't wait to see that," he said. "You know, Elder, you and your forest are like guardians of this part of the galaxy now. You protect this planet from anyone who might want to harm it." Elder's leaves shimmered with pride. "Guardians of the galaxy," it said. "I like that." As Jake's ship lifted off, the whole forest waved goodbye with their branches. Jake waved back, his heart full of happiness and adventure. He had come to this planet looking for new discoveries. Instead, he had found friends, courage, and a reminder that sometimes the most amazing things in the galaxy are the ones we protect and cherish.